This podcast is produced by the Harwood Productions Podcast Network. To learn more about the network and to find more of our shows, visit us online at www.harwoodpodcast.com.
This bread is made with kalamata olives and it has a great chewy crust. And what you do is you make the bread one afternoon and put it in the refrigerator overnight to rise and then bake it off the next day. So we start by measuring out 2 1/4 teaspoons of active dry yeast. Now in the States, that is 1 packet of yeast. And then to that, we're going to be putting some water with it. Now the water needs to be between 105 and 115 degrees. I sort of do that in a larger measuring cup and then measure out 1/4 cup, add it to the yeast and kind of give that a little stir. And that's just going to kind of sit and proof while we're getting our other ingredients together. Now for this bread, we're going to be using 2 kinds of flour. And the first is a cup of bread flour. And this is a flour that has a little bit more protein, a little more gluten structure to it. And then we're going to use 2 cups of regular flour. And you can see I have my giant 2-cup measuring cup there. And I'm going to be using my mixer, and I'm going to start with the paddle on, and I'm going to put the 1 cup of bread flour in. I'm going to put 3/4 cup of just warm water in, and I'm going to use the paddle to kind of get that mixed together, and then I'm going to add the 2 cups of regular flour and let that mix together just for a minute or so. And then I'm going to take my yeast that is proofed in that water and go ahead and add that to the mixer as well. Now this is just going to mix on a low speed until the water and the flours come together. Then I'm going to raise the mixture up and I'm going to scrape the paddle off, and I'm going to switch now to my dough hook. And that's what's really going to start kneading this dough. Now while the dough is kneading, we're going to get our olives ready. And if you can, get pitted kalamata olives. It'll make your life a lot easier. Now we want to go ahead and get a total of 3/4 cup of olives. But what I do is I rough chop all of them, just kind of like this. And then I measure out 1/2 cup of the large cut, because I like to have both large and finer pieces in the bread. So measure out 1/2 cup of the large, and then go ahead and get a few more olives out. And for the last 1/4 cup, chop these olives up fairly fine. That way you get this nice sprinkling of olive taste all throughout your bread. Then we're going to go back to the mixer, and notice I've got the dough hook going a little bit faster. I'm going to sprinkle in 2 teaspoons of kosher salt, and then I'm going to stop the mixer and add my olives. And then we're just going to drop the dough hook, and we're going to let that go on a medium to medium high speed and just mix together. Now let's get a medium-sized bowl with a drizzle of canola oil, and use your paper towel and just do a thin coating of oil all throughout that bowl. Then you can see on my little cutting board, I've dusted it with some flour, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to get all of that olive dough out of the mixing bowl. And it's a pretty wet dough, which is okay. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to knead this just a little bit. I want it to become a little more elasticy. So I'm going to sprinkle some flour on it, and I'm just going to take my hands and I'm going to knead it. And if you recall from other shows, I've shown you how I knead. I use my heel of my hand, push it down, turn the dough 1/4 turn, push the heel of my hand down again. And if I'm feeling that the dough's getting a little sticky, I just put a little sprinkling of flour. And I'm just going to do this basically, I don't know, for a couple of minutes, not too long. But you'll start to feel the dough really come together and get much more elasticy feeling and very smooth. So this is looking really good. So I'm going to take it, put it upside down in the bowl, and just kind of flip it back over so it's got a nice coating of oil on the top. And then I'm just going to put a piece of plastic wrap over the top. And then this is going to go into the refrigerator for a slow rise overnight. Now, the next day, Hello. We're going to get our dough out. You can see it's actually risen, which is nice, but nice and slow. We've got to release that gas, so I'm just going to punch it down. I've got a cutting board out again. I'm going to dust it with some flour, and we're going to go ahead and give this a little bit of a knead as well. So again, we're just going to put a little dusting of flour, and you're going to find it's not quite as sticky as it was yesterday, but the dough is pretty cold, so we need to kind of warm it up. And you'll notice I'm doing the same kind of kneading technique, but I'm using 2 hands to kind of move the dough along. And then pretty soon it's feeling really nice and smooth. Now this bread is going to go through a second rise. So notice I have a kind of a medium-sized cutting board that I'm going to put a piece of parchment on top. And then I'm going to get a little bit of cornmeal and I'm going to sprinkle that on top of the parchment. And that works as a really nice bottom crust for this bread. Then we're going to make our proofing box in the microwave. So we get a cup of water and we're going to microwave that for a minute to get it nice and hot. And then we're going to take it and move it back in the back corner of the microwave. Now this is why I have that cutting board, because what I'm going to do is I've got the bread on there. A baking sheet won't fit in the microwave. So I've got this nice and stable in there. I'm going to take a clean kitchen towel and lay that right on top like this. And we're going to close this up. Now, because this bread is cold, it's going to need to rise for about an hour and a half. And we're just going to let it do its thing. And then after that time, we're going to pull it out and we'll see that it has really risen nicely. Now it's about doubled in size, which is great, but we've got to get that cutting board out from under it. So I'm going to slide that out and slide the parchment right onto a baking sheet that we can put in the oven. And then I like to take a knife and just go ahead and cut an X right in the top. That way, as it puffs up more in the oven, it kind of breaks away. And then this is how we get a great crust. You get a water bottle and you spritz the top of it before you put it in the oven. Now this bread bakes for a total of 35 minutes, but after about 3 minutes, the first 3 minutes, you're going to pull the bread out and spritz it again with water and then pop it right back in. And then you're going to do this one more time 4 minutes later, and that's the last time. But that water makes this incredibly chewy crust. And then we just let it go for the full 35 minutes. And then when we pull it out, it is this wonderful golden brown bread. It smells fantastic, and it really looks like a nice artisan bread. We've got to get that parchment, look at how browned that's gotten, off of the baking sheet and onto a cooling rack. And you'll notice this is a sturdy bread. It's got a great crumb, a great crust on the outside, and you have to let it cool a little bit. But when you do cut it, do use a serrated knife. Any kind of other knife is not going to go through it. But when you do slice it through, you're just going to find the most tender bread on the inside with all these great hunks of kalamata olive, and the little olives that we've chopped up are all through the bread. It's really fantastic. And it's interesting, this bread has more of a slow rise characteristic to its flavor, and that's one of the beauties of letting it rise overnight in the refrigerator. Now, if you'd like to get the recipe for this olive bread, just go to our website and visit the Daily Bread show notes, and I'll have the recipe there for you. Also, don't forget to sign up for our monthly newsletter. And of course, if you have any questions about anything, please feel free to send me an email. I'll see you next time.